The year is 1879, the place is Hollow Bluff, Texas. A name that sounds like something out of a ghost story, and perhaps, for good reason. The air was thick with dust and the promise of a future forged in iron and steam. The Texas Pacific Railway was a lifeline, a roaring beast of steel and fire connecting a wild, untamed land. But on one particular track, heading straight for the newly carved Hollow Bluff Tunnel, the beast met its match. This isn't a story of a train crash. It's far stranger than that. It's the story of a train that entered a tunnel and never came out. Not because it was blocked, or buried, or derailed, but because its frantic screams of twisting metal and shrieking steam simply went on and on. The sound echoed out of the tunnel's mouth, a horrifying chorus that seemed to defy the very laws of physics. A phantom sound that haunted the area for weeks, and a mystery that has baffled historians and engineers ever since. Call to action: if you've ever felt a chill listening to an old ghost story, you're going to want to stick around for this one. Before we dive into the chilling tale of Hollow Bluff, please take a second to hit that like button. It tells YouTube you love this kind of content. And while you're at it, subscribe and ring the bell so you don't miss our next deep dive into the unexplained. Sharing this with a friend also helps us bring these stories to light. Thanks so much for your support. The American West in the late 1870s was a place of endless possibility and harsh realities. It was a land waiting to be tamed, a vast expanse of rolling plains and rugged mountains where fortune and peril walked hand in hand. But more than anything else, it was a land hungry for connection. And that connection came in the form of a train, a locomotive, breathing fire and steam, its iron tracks a lifeline stretching across the frontier. In a small, dusty corner of Texas, the hope for that connection was palpable. The Texas Pacific Railway was pushing westward, and the local communities, particularly the fledgling town near Hollow Bluff, saw it as their ticket to prosperity. The railroad wasn't just a convenience, it was a promise. It meant mail from back east, supplies for their stores, and a way to ship their own goods to a wider market. It was progress in its most tangible form, a symbol that the future had finally arrived. The biggest engineering feat on this new stretch of track was the Hollow Bluff Rail Tunnel. Carved through solid rock, it was a testament to human ingenuity and grit. The work was backbreaking and dangerous, a symphony of dynamite blasts and the rhythmic clang of picks against stone. It was a project born of pure ambition, a way to cut through the treacherous landscape and shorten the journey by miles. The townspeople were proud of it, seeing it as their own personal marvel of the modern world. The tunnel was more than just a passage, it was a gateway. On one side, there was the known world, the hard-won settlements of Texas. On the other, the great unknown, the vast unsettled territories waiting to be claimed. Every train that passed through it was a symbol of that journey, a thunderous heartbeat carrying the hopes of a nation westward. But what if the gateway led somewhere else entirely? What if this seemingly normal passage was the entrance to a mystery so profound, so terrifying, it would redefine everything they thought they knew about progress and reality? The train was the Texas Pacific Engine, No. 13, a magnificent beast of black iron and polished brass. Its whistle a familiar sound that pierced the Texas air. Its crew was a seasoned lot, men who had spent their lives on the rails. The engineer, a no-nonsense veteran named Jedediah Price, had a steady hand and an uncanny feel for the steel giant he commanded. His fireman, a young man named Billy, was known for his tireless energy and his dream of one day becoming an engineer himself. On that particular afternoon, the train was pulling a routine mix of cars. There were a few passenger cars, filled with families heading west with a mixture of hope and trepidation in their hearts. There were boxcars loaded with supplies, sacks of flour, crates of tools and bundles of newly milled lumber. It was a picture of ordinary life on the American frontier, a snapshot of progress rolling forward on its unyielding path. No one on that train could have felt anything but the regular rhythm of the rails. As they approached Hollow Bluff, the sun was beginning to dip below the horizon, painting the sky in fiery shades of orange and pink. The tunnel's mouth, a dark, perfectly round circle against the rock face, loomed ahead. It was a sight they had all seen before, a brief moment of darkness before they emerged into the light on the other side. Jedediah pulled the whistle, a sharp, piercing sound that echoed off the canyon walls as a final salute to the open air. The train, with a rhythmic clatter and a cloud of steam, disappeared into the tunnel. The people watching from a distance saw the final car vanish, and they waited for the familiar sight of the locomotive's headlight on the other side. They waited for the sound of its whistle, the joyful signal that it had passed through successfully, but the light never appeared. The whistle never sounded, and the train, for all intents and purposes, was simply gone. But it wasn't quiet. It was far from quiet. The silence was immediately replaced by something far more chilling. The people watching from a distance, a small group of railroad workers and a few curious onlookers, didn't worry at first. A train takes time to pass through a tunnel, especially a new one. But as the seconds bled into minutes, a deep unease began to settle over the group. The silence was wrong. The air, which should have been filled with the retreating clatter of the train, was still and empty. It was then that the first sound came. It wasn't a rumble or a crash. It was a high-pitched metallic shriek, the sound of steel scraping against steel, of twisting metal under immense pressure. It was the frantic scream of the train's brakes, but it didn't last for a few moments as a typical screech would. It continued. The shriek became a chorus of groaning metal and hiss of escaping steam, a cacophony of agony that seemed to be echoing out from the dark mouth of the tunnel itself. It was the sound of the train in its final, horrific moments. Only those moments seemed to stretch on without end. The onlookers froze, their faces turning from curiosity to pure terror. The sound was so raw, so loud, and so full of what could only be described as mechanical anguish. It was as if the train was trapped inside the rock, screaming for help. But where was the crash? Where was the smoke? Where was the debris? The sound was coming from the tunnel, but nothing was coming out. There was no visible destruction, no plume of black smoke, no pile of splintered wood, just the continuous, relentless scream. One of the railroad foremen, a man named Thomas, was the first to react. Grabbing a lantern, he ran to the tunnel's entrance and peered into the darkness. His light cut through the gloom, showing nothing but an empty, perfectly formed passage. The tracks were clear. There were no signs of a derailment, no shattered cars, no sign that anything had ever happened. He shone his light as far as it could go, but it was just a dark hole with a terrifying sound pouring out of it. The sound went on for what felt like an eternity, a horrifying phantom echo that slowly faded to a whisper, and then to a low hum, before finally, mercifully, it stopped. The eerie silence that followed was even more chilling than the noise itself. The train was gone. All that remained was its scream. The Texas Pacific Railway was a business built on logic, not legend. The moment news of the incident reached the company's regional headquarters, a team of engineers, foremen, and high-ranking officials was dispatched to Hollow Bluff. They arrived with blueprints and measuring tapes, their faces a mix of skepticism and deep concern. To them, the story was impossible. A train simply couldn't vanish. There had to be a logical explanation: a track collapse, a landslide, a steam explosion, something. Their investigation began at the mouth of the tunnel. They walked the tracks inch by inch, their lanterns illuminating every tie and every spike. They found nothing out of place. The rails were intact, the ballast was undisturbed, and the tunnel itself was structurally sound. There was no sign of a crash, no smoke residue, no smell of burnt oil. It was as if the train had simply ceased to exist the moment it entered the rock face. They even sent a small handcar into the tunnel, cautiously pushing it a few hundred feet, then 1,000, before turning back. The passage was empty. The logical theories began to crumble. A massive landslide would have left a pile of rock and dirt, blocking the tunnel completely. A steam explosion would have left debris and a powerful shockwave. A derailment would have left twisted wreckage. There was absolutely no evidence of any of these things. The only remaining physical clue was the silence. The eerie, unnatural silence that had followed the terrifying scream. The investigators were baffled. They looked at each other, their faces betraying their growing frustration and a dawning, unwelcome sense of dread. One of the engineers, a man named Henderson, proposed a truly desperate idea. He theorized that the train had somehow been pushed into an undiscovered cave or fissure within the rock, but even that felt like a fantasy. They spent days mapping the tunnel and the surrounding cliffs, searching for any sign of a hidden passage. They found none. The Hollow Bluff tunnel was a perfectly straight line carved through solid rock, with a clear entry and a clear exit. And yet, one of the most powerful machines of the age had entered one end and simply vanished, before it could reach the other. What could be powerful enough to make a 100-ton train disappear without a trace? The engineers' logic and their lifelong experience were failing them, forcing them to consider a truth far stranger than they could have ever imagined. With all logical explanations exhausted, the vacuum of knowledge was quickly filled with theories. As the weeks turned into months, the story of the missing train of Hollow Bluff transcended from a local mystery into a national legend. Newspapers sensationalized the tale, and the public, desperate for an answer, offered up a number of bizarre and fantastic explanations. They came in two main varieties: the supernatural and the almost as strange scientific. The most popular supernatural theory was that the train had fallen victim to a temporal echo. This idea, which sounds more like something from science fiction than 19th century folklore, suggested that the unique geological properties of Hollow Bluff created a temporal distortion. The train hadn't vanished. It had been displaced in time. The endless scream wasn't a sound from the past. It was a ghost of a sound, an echo of the train's final, desperate moments trapped in a temporal loop. This theory was alluring because it explained both the disappearance and the continuous, phantom noise. It was a story of a train that was always crashing, but never arriving. Another theory, born from the spiritualist movement of the era, posited that the tunnel was a spectral gateway. Some claimed the tunnel led not through a mountain, but to another dimension entirely. They believed the train, with all its living souls, had passed through this unseen doorway and was now a phantom train, eternally traversing an unseen world. The screams, in this version, were a faint cry from the other side, a chilling reminder of a tragedy that was both real and completely unreachable. But what about the less fantastical, though still extraordinary, scientific theories? A few, far ahead of their time, suggested that the shape of the tunnel and the properties of the rock created a unique acoustic anomaly. They proposed that the sound of the train's whistle and the screeching of its brakes had been amplified and somehow trapped within the tunnel. The sound waves, they theorized, bounced back and forth, decaying so slowly that they created the illusion of a continuous scream, a kind of auditory mirage that fooled the ears. It was a beautiful, if unprovable, theory that offered a rational explanation for an irrational event. And then there was the most mundane, yet still perplexing, idea that a deep, undiscovered chasm had indeed swallowed the train whole, that the ground beneath the tracks had simply given way, a perfect, clean break that left no surface evidence. The train and its cargo, they argued, fell into a pit so deep that its wreckage was lost forever. This theory was the most grounded, but it still couldn't account for the endless screaming. All of these theories, from the supernatural to the scientific, had one thing in common. They were all a desperate attempt to put a frame around a picture that simply would unfit. The train was gone, the scream had ended, but the mystery, and the search for an answer, had just begun. The Texas Pacific engine, No. 13 remains a footnote in railway history, a strange and unresolved case that was ultimately overshadowed by new lines, new tunnels, and new mysteries. But in the small community of Hollow Bluff, the story became a part of the landscape. The tunnel, once a symbol of progress, became a silent monument to the unexplainable. Locals would tell the tale to travelers, their voices hushed, their eyes wide with a mixture of fear and pride. The Hollow Bluff Phantom, as it was eventually called, became a cautionary tale, a ghost story that was, by all accounts, completely and terrifyingly real. Over the centuries, the legend has evolved, but it has never died. It is a testament to our enduring fascination with the things we cannot explain. We are a species that craves answers, that builds machines to understand the universe and maps to chart every inch of our planet. But deep down, we need to believe that there are still secrets, that not every mystery can be neatly solved. The Hollow Bluff Rail Tunnel is one of those secrets. It's a reminder that sometimes, the world operates on principles we haven't discovered yet, and that sometimes, a train can just vanish. Modern-day researchers and historians have revisited the case countless times. Armed with new technology and new theories, they've used ground-penetrating radar to scan the rock. Looking for a hidden fissure or a collapsed cavern, they've analyzed the atmospheric conditions of the day, searching for a meteorological event that could have caused the sound. But every new investigation leads to the same conclusion. There is no physical evidence of a crash, no logical reason for the train's disappearance, and no scientific explanation for the endless, ghostly scream. The tunnel remains a perfectly normal-looking hole in a mountain that holds a profound and enduring secret. Perhaps the true legacy of the Hollow Bluff Rail Tunnel isn't about the train at all, but about the people who witnessed its disappearance. It's about their fear, their desperation, and their eventual acceptance of a world where things don't always make sense. It's a story about the power of belief, about the human need to fill the empty spaces with meaning, even if that meaning is terrifying. The legend of the train that screamed without end is more than just a spooky tale. It's a mirror, reflecting our deepest fears and our most fundamental need to understand the world, even when the world refuses to be understood.